The rain was a cold, steady rhythm against the window of her tiny studio apartment, a sound that usually soothed Emma Carter. Tonight, it felt like nails tapping on the coffin of her dreams. She traced the smooth, worn surface of her violin case, a relic from a life that now felt like it belonged to someone else. Inside, the instrument lay silent, its strings loosened, a hairline crack in its spruce top a physical echo of the fracture in her heart. The prestigious Oberlin audition was in 6 months, and with it, the chance for a full scholarship, for a real future in music. But the crack, a result of a careless shove in a crowded subway car, needed specialized repair she could never afford. The estimate from the luthier, a kind-eyed man who'd winced in sympathy, was a number that dwarfed her rent for a year. Across the city, in a penthouse that seemed to absorb the city's lights rather than reflect them, Alexander Alex Thorne stared at a different set of numbers on his sleek laptop screen. His father's corporate legacy, a real estate empire built on cold calculation, flashed in red and green. At 22, Alex was being groomed to take over, but his passion lay in the chaotic, soulful world of indie filmmaking. His latest short film, a poignant piece about a street musician, had been rejected from another festival. His father, Richard Thorne, saw art as a hobby, not a life. Their dinner that evening had been another lecture on fiscal responsibility, a word that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. Emma and Alex existed in parallel universes, their paths never meant to cross. They did, however, at the Rustic Note, a hole-in-the-wall jazz bar where Emma waited tables and Alex sometimes went to think. He was captivated by the sadness in her eyes, a depth he tried and failed to capture with his camera. She noticed him, too, the brooding young man in the expensive but casually worn sweater, scribbling in a notebook, so out of place yet so intently present. A spilled glass of Merlot led to an apology, which led to a conversation that stretched until the bar closed. He spoke of frames and stories, she spoke of notes and silence. For a few weeks, they were a sanctuary for each other. Alex, with his generous allowance, quietly covered a month of her rent when her hours were cut. Emma, in turn, became the first person to truly see his films, offering critiques that were both gentle and incisive. They were two wounded birds, finding a temporary perch in each other's company. It was Alex who, in a desperate attempt to fix something for someone he was coming to care for deeply, made the catastrophic mistake. He brought Emma's violin to his father. "Dad, you have connections. There's this master luthier in Switzerland, you golf with his patron. It's just a favor." He presented it as a minor charity case, a talented girl down on her luck. Richard Thorne examined the instrument with the dispassionate eye of a man used to appraising assets. He saw not a vessel of beauty, but an object with a flaw. Then he looked at the photograph Alex had shown him of Emma, her eyes alight as she played. He saw something else entirely, a vulnerability that could be leveraged, a beautiful, desperate pawn. He agreed to help, bypassing Alex entirely. A week later, a car service Emma didn't call picked her up. It delivered her to the Thorne building, to an office that felt like a minimalist cage. Richard Thorne, a man in his late 50s with silver-templed hair and eyes the color of a winter sea, was chillingly cordial. He offered her a seat that cost more than her violin. He praised her talent, mentioned Alex's fondness for her, and then, without a flicker of emotion, laid out his terms. The luthier in Zurich was expecting the violin. The surgery for its crack would be performed, and a trust would be established for her final year of tuition and audition travel. The sum was life-changing. In return, Richard said, steepling his fingers, "You will end your association with my son completely, permanently. You will provide a convincing reason that ensures he focuses on his familial duties. And you will," he paused, letting the sterile air grow heavy, "accompany me to certain social functions as my companion. A monthly dinner, perhaps a gallery opening, for a period of 1 year." Emma felt the floor tilt. "Companion?" she whispered, the word thick with unspeakable implication. "Aesthetic companionship," Richard clarified, his voice devoid of warmth. "You are lovely, and talented. It reflects well. My son's distractions do not. This is a business arrangement, Miss Carter. I am purchasing your absence from his life, and your presence in mine, for a defined purpose and duration. Your body, in a social sense, is part of the contract. The rest is your choice, but the terms of the agreement are not." The choice was no choice at all. To say no was to consign her violin, her scholarship, her future to the rain-soaked oblivion of her apartment. To say yes was to sell a piece of her soul. She thought of the crack in the spruce, the silent strings. She thought of Alex's hopeful, earnest face. With a numbness that started in her core and spread to her fingertips, she heard her own voice, flat and foreign, Say, I accept. The lie she crafted for Alex was a masterpiece of cruelty, designed by Richard but delivered with Emma's own shattered conviction. She met Alex at their usual cafe, her hands trembling under the table. Your father offered me the money, she said, unable to meet his eyes. And I took it. All of it. I realized this thing with you was just a distraction from what I really need, which is security. Your world, his world, it's what I want. She saw the light in his eyes die, replaced by a betrayal so profound it turned his love to ash. He left without a word, and a part of Emma died with him. The violin returned from Switzerland, flawless, its voice more resonant than ever. The money appeared in her account. Each transaction felt like a shackle clicking shut. The monthly dinners with Richard were a special kind of hell. He was never overtly inappropriate, but his possession was absolute. A hand on the small of her back lingered too long. His gaze was a clinical appraisal. He would speak of her talent as if he owned that, too. My protégé, he would call her to his associates, and she would force a smile, feeling like a beautifully mounted butterfly. Alex, meanwhile, plunged into the family business with a ferocity that stunned his father. The sensitive filmmaker was buried under layers of cynicism. He dated models from his father's social circle, empty relationships that were reported in the society pages Emma was now forced to read. The one film he made after their split was a brutal, angry piece about greed and corruption. It won awards. Richard was pleased. The plan was working perfectly. Emma's audition for Oberlin was a performance fueled by pure, channeled anguish. The music that poured from her repaired violin was transcendent, a heartbreak-given sound. She won the scholarship. On the night of her acceptance, Richard took her to a celebratory dinner at an exclusive club. That night, for the first time, he crossed a line from implication to explicit demand. In the back of the limousine, his hand clamped over hers with a pressure that was not negotiable. The agreement has been satisfactory, he said, but arrangements can be amended. You are leaving soon. I require a more concrete conclusion. Emma fled the car, the ghost of his touch burning her skin. She ran, not to her apartment, but instinctively to the one place that still held her echo of warmth, the alley behind the rustic note. And there, amidst the smell of old brick and discarded boxes, she broke. Sobs racked her body, loud, ugly, and uncontrolled. Fate, it seemed, was not entirely without pity. Alex was there. He had come to the bar, a pathetic attempt to haunt the ghost of his old happiness. He found the reality instead. Emma, collapsed against the wall, her carefully constructed facade in ruins. The sight of her, utterly shattered, cut through his anger. This was not the face of a greedy social climber. Emma, his voice was hoarse. The story, the whole sordid, devastating truth, tumbled out in ragged fragments between gasps. The ultimatum, the contract, the lies she was forced to tell, the constant, chilling pressure. I sold my body to your dad for surgery. She finally choked out the crude summation of her year of hell. Not in the way people think, but I sold my freedom, my truth, my friendship with you. I sold every part of myself that mattered to fix that violin. Alex listened, his initial shock hardening into a cold, clear fury. He saw his father's manipulation not just of Emma, but of him. He had been played just as cruelly, turned into a weapon to hurt her and a puppet to fall in line. The anger wasn't directed at Emma anymore, it was a laser focused on the source of all this poison. The confrontation at the penthouse was not a shouting match, it was a quiet, lethal detonation. Alex confronted Richard not with teenage rebellion, but with the cold authority of a business partner terminating a toxic asset. He presented not just Emma's testimony, but a threat. He had quietly gathered evidence of creative accounting in one of Richard's newer developments, a hobbyist cipher detail turned into a forensic tool. You have two choices, Alex said, his voice eerily calm. You release Emma from every condition of that arrangement. You sign over the full, promised funds to her, no strings, with a legally binding document I've had drawn up, and you will never, ever contact her again. Or, I take this to the board and to the press. Not the criminal kind, perhaps, but the kind that ruins reputations. Thorne patriarch bullies music student. I'll release my film about greed and dedicate it to you. Richard Thorne, for the first time, saw his son not as a disappointment, but as a formidable adversary. The cost of winning this petty game had just skyrocketed. With a look of utter contempt, he picked up the pen. The aftermath was not a simple fairy tale reunion. The trust between Emma and Alex was a fragile, cracked thing itself, needing its own careful repair. They couldn't just go back to the cafe and pick up where they left off. The shadows were too long. Emma left for Oberlin, her future finally her own, but her heart a tangled mess of guilt and a lingering, painful love. Alex, using the resources he now controlled, established a small independent film foundation, deliberately separate from the Thorn Empire. Their healing happened in letters, long, honest emails that were themselves a form of surgery. He wrote about the anger, the betrayal he felt toward his father, and his own guilt for ever bringing her into his father's orbit. She wrote about the shame, the nightmares of being trapped in that limousine, and the ghost of the music she'd almost lost. It was a slow, painful duet of forgiveness. A year later, Alex premiered his new film at a small, independent theater. The poster bore a single, powerful image, a woman's hands, cradling a cracked violin, light pouring from the fissure. It was titled Kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, acknowledging the breakage as part of the object's history. He didn't know if she would come, but as the lights went down, he saw a familiar figure slip into a seat in the back. Emma. The film was a wordless, beautiful montage, a musician, a broken instrument, a shadowy figure offering a gilded cage, the slow suffocation, and finally, a daring, desperate escape where the character, in a final act, uses the very instrument that was both her prison and her passion to shatter the glass walls around her. The final scene was of her playing, the cracks in the violin now visible seams of gold, the music not pristine, but stronger, richer, and profoundly more beautiful for having been broken. After the applause faded, they found each other in the lobby. No grand embrace, just a shared, deep breath. You fixed it, Emma said softly, her eyes on his. You turned it into something beautiful. We did, Alex corrected. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, a question. The cracks, they don't go away, do they? No, she said, and finally, a real, true smile touched her lips. It was a smile that knew pain, but was no longer defined by it. But they can become where the light comes through. She slid her hand into his, the grip firm, a promise of a new, honest composition, written not in notes or on screens, but in the hard-won quiet of two souls who had finally bought back their own stories.